It's another lovely Saturday, and you are welcome to your favorite news on Current Affairs Talk Show, China Now. My name is Makiza Latifa. Let's take our weekly news report of what's trending in China from Kris, who will talk about the visit of U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen to China, and then Chinese President Xi Jinping's meeting with the chairman of the National Assembly of Vietnam in Beijing. Also, the Chinese embassy in the U.S. has lashed out at the U.S. for overstretching the scope of normal law enforcement after many Chinese citizens were subjected to hours of interrogation when entering or leaving the U.S. Stay with us for more details.
China Current is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started. Hi, welcome to China Currents. I'm Kris. Let's start this episode with US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's visit to China. On Sunday, Chinese Premier Li Qiang met with US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in Beijing, where he urged the US to work with China to adhere to the basic norms of the market economy of fair competition and open cooperation, and refrain from politicizing or overstretching this concept of national security regarding economic and trade issues. Yellen's closely watched trip to China, which includes meetings with senior Chinese officials, has underscored the signs of stabilization for China-US bilateral ties amid increased exchanges between high-level officials. However, the US is continuing its crackdown campaign against Chinese industries and businesses with claims such as overcapacity posing risks for a bilateral relationship. During the meeting on Sunday morning, the Chinese premier said that under the strategic guidance of the two heads of state, China-US relations are currently stabilizing, and China hopes the two countries can be partners rather than adversaries, with mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and win-win cooperation. Next up, when Yellen was in China, Chinese officials hit out at US and European accusations of overcapacity in China's electric vehicle industry, while Chinese experts believe that playing the overcapacity card shows the West's insecurity over China's competitive advantage. They added that this is also another form of de-risking from China, which will only hinder progress towards their green and low-carbon transformation. Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao on Sunday hit out at Western accusation of overcapacity in China's EV industry, saying that China's advantage is built on innovation, not subsidies. Chinese Vice Finance Minister Liao Min on Monday also addressed the U.S. accusation of China's overcapacity in emerging industries, emphasizing the importance of market adjustment. However, trade protectionism measures are not the solution, he said. The remarks come as the latest response to recent hypes from the US and Europe, claiming that China has overcapacity in some industries, such as EVs, as they attempt to restrict China's market access and protect their own industries through protectionist measures. Next up, following Yellen, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrived in China on Monday for an official visit. Many observers said that the China-Russian Comprehensive Strategic Partnership will be further strengthened despite US pressure. At the invitation of Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who is also a member of the Politburo of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, the Russian top diplomat paid an official visit to China from Monday to Tuesday. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning said at the routine press conference on Monday that the two sides will exchange views and coordinate stances on development of bilateral ties, cooperation in different fields, and international issues of shared common concern on the sidelines of the 75th anniversary of the establishment of China-Russia diplomatic relations. On Tuesday, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Beijing. Chinese analysts said that the meeting sends a strong signal that the China-Russia partnership continues to be key for the global strategic balance and a hope for promoting a multipolar world in which countries of the Global South will have a greater role to play. Xi asked Lavrov to convey his sincere greetings to Russian President Vladimir Putin, noting that this year marks the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between the two countries. She said China and Russia have embarked on a new path of harmonious coexistence and win-win cooperation between major countries and neighbors, which has benefited the two countries and their peoples and contributed wisdom and strength to international fairness and justice. Next up, Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday met with the chairman of the National Assembly of Vietnam, Van Dinh Huê, in Beijing. At the invitation of Zhao Leji, chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Huê is in China for a 6-day official visit beginning on Sunday. The head of the assembly is officially among the 4 pillars of leadership in Vietnam, which has no paramount leader, noting that the pillars also include the party chief, the president, and the prime minister. While asking Van Dinh Huê to convey his cordial greetings to Nguyen Phu Trong, General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam's Central Committee, Xi also said that during his visit to Vietnam at the end of last year, he and Nguyen Phu Trong jointly announced the building of a China-Vietnam community with a shared future that carries strategic significance, opening a new chapter in bilateral ties. Next up, on Wednesday, Xi Jinping, General Secretary of the Communist Party of China Central Committee, met with Ma Ying-jeou in Beijing. Compatriots from both sides of the Taiwan Straits belong to the same Chinese nation, she said. The over 5,000-year history of the Chinese nation saw successive generations of ancestors move and settle down in Taiwan, and people from across the strait fight side by side to recover the island from foreign invaders. People on both sides of the Taiwan Strait are all Chinese, she said. There are no knots that cannot be untied, no issues that cannot be discussed, and no force that can separate us. He said that the difference in systems does not alter the reality that both sides of the strait belong to the one China, and external interference cannot hold back the historical trend of national reunification. In a meeting, Ma said that upholding the 1992 consensus and opposing Taiwan independence are the common political foundation of the peaceful development of cross-strait relations. The meeting marks the second meeting between Xi and Ma after the two had a historical exchange in Singapore in 2015. Next up, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has become the latest Western political leader to open an account on TikTok, an ultra-popular video-sharing platform owned by Chinese company ByteDance that is undergoing attacks from some Western countries, especially the US, due to national security concerns. Analysts said the growing number of Western politicians opening TikTok accounts not only proves the vitality and competitiveness of the platform, but also shows the accusation that the app is a national security threat is untenable. Attacking TikTok while using the platform only shows the hypocrisy of some politicians whose real intention is to suppress the development of Chinese tech companies. In the first video posted by Scholz's account, the German Chancellor sits at his desk, showing a glimpse of his office. He also announced his TikTok channel on X, formerly Twitter, saying that "I want dance" promised. According to German government spokesperson Steffen Hebestreit, the TikTok channel aims to connect with a younger audience that the German government has to go where citizens go to get information. Next up, the Chinese embassy in the US lashed out at the US for overstretching the scope of normal law enforcement after a number of Chinese citizens have been subject to hours of interrogation in a small black room while entering or leaving the US. Observers said the duplicitous nature of Biden administration will stoke up distrust, further foster hostility among peoples of the two countries, and derail the commitment of the two leaders to advance bilateral relations. They urged the US to heed a kind reminder from China and alter their operational behavior to avoid irreversible harm to people-to-people exchanges. Quoting data, a spokesperson of the Chinese embassy in the US said in a statement that nearly 300 Chinese citizens have been deported by the US since July 2021, including more than 70 Chinese students with legal and valid materials. Since November 2023, at Washington Dulles Airport alone, there have been 10 cases of Chinese students being harassed, interrogated, and after having their visas cancelled, deported. Next up, British Foreign Secretary David Cameron repeatedly mentioned China during his US Capitol lobbying trip, aiming to unblock a $60 billion aid package for Ukraine held up in the US Congress. Chinese analysts said on Tuesday it is a malicious move by Cameron is using to scapegoat China for his country's decision-making failures in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, signaling the UK's growing anxiety regarding the trajectory of the conflict. A $60 billion package of military aid is bogged down in the US House of Representatives as populist conservatives seek to block further funding for the two-year-old conflict, and some mainstream Republicans demand concessions on border security before supporting the bill. Cameron made the remarks during and after a meeting with US Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the US State Department on Tuesday US local time, and in an obvious bid to persuade the Congress to swiftly approve the aid. We know it's right to send this very clear message to all those watching around the world, including China, that we stand by our allies and we don't reward aggression, that we help those who are trying to fight it off, and we know it's right for our own security, the British Foreign Secretary said at a joint press conference with Blinken on Tuesday. Cameron repeatedly mentioned China when he sought US support for aid in Ukraine in Washington. This serves as a scapegoat for his decision-making failures in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We're also using the issue to facilitate global geopolitical competition against China by the UK and the US, undermining China's international influence. These malicious actions deserve caution, said Li Haidong, a professor from the China Foreign Affairs University. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you have any thoughts and comments about our show, please reach us at the email address below. I'm Kris, looking forward to hearing from you, and see you next time.
Thank you, Kris. Let's now do Threshold with Lisa, who will share with us some exciting tech innovations and announcements that happened in China recently. And the top of her list is the study called the Global AI Talent Tracker 2.0, conducted by a think tank known as Macropolo, which revealed that China has experienced a surge in its domestic AI talent pool. And apart from AI, another field of technology with fierce global competition that Lisa will tell you about in this episode of Threshold is renewable energy.
Hi, I'm Lisa, and this is Threshold in China. Today, we are going to share some exciting tech innovations and announcements that happened in China recently. In the world of AI, another thrilling global competition is unfolding. But the battle is not fought over silicon or lines of code. It is a battle for something far more precious, and that is human talent. Countries around the world are racing to attract and retain the most brilliant minds in artificial intelligence. A think tank called Macropolo conducted a study called the Global AI Talent Tracker 2.0. One of the key takeaways from the study is that China has experienced a surge in its domestic AI talent pool. China now accounts for 47% of the world's top AI researchers. That is a jump from 29% in just 3 years. In addition, between 2019 and 2022, Chinese institutions have made significant progress and experienced a rapid climb in the global rankings. In 2022, 6 Chinese institutions entered the top 25, compared to only 2 in 2019. Notably, Tsinghua University and Peking University secured 3rd and 6th place respectively in 2022. Not only has China cultivated a vast domestic talent pool, but it has also become a significant exporter of AI expertise, particularly to the United States, where Chinese researchers now constitute 38% of the AI workforce. However, considering the political headwind in the US and the sensitivity of AI research, this situation might change in the future. Currently, over 51% of Chinese AI undergraduates choose to pursue graduate studies within their home country, and nearly 31% decide to stay in China for work after completing their higher education. Interestingly, this pattern of reduced mobility among top-tier AI researchers is not happening only in China. The report revealed a broader trend, with only 42% of the world's elite AI talent working not in their own countries in 2022, down from 55% in 2019. The United States, though, remained a magnet for AI talent, with American and Chinese researchers together constituting 75% of the top AI talent pool in US institutions. Despite the international competition, the US continues to be the home to 60% of the world's premier AI institutions. While China and the United States dominate the global AI talent landscape, the report shows that other countries are making significant strides. The United Kingdom, South Korea, and continental Europe are emerging as attractive destinations for top AI researchers. Conversely, India and Canada have experienced relative declines in their rankings as countries of origin for top-tier AI talent. The ability to attract and retain the world's brightest mind in this field will undoubtedly shape the future of technology, geopolitics, and economic competitiveness. The stakes have never been higher. Apart from AI, another field of technology with fierce global competition is renewable energy. Over the past 2 decades, China has undergone a remarkable transformation in wind energy. Its installed wind power capacity has soared from just 4 gigawatts in 2007 to an astonishing 329 gigawatts by 2021, a 31% annual growth rate. In addition to output, Chinese turbine manufacturers also lead in product design and innovation. In the last 4 years, 426 new Chinese turbine models have been released, versus just 29 new turbines outside of China, according to consultancy Wood Mackenzie. A key driver behind China's wind power surge has been the plummeting cost of turbine installation. Recent tender pricing documents for a massive 9.1 million kilowatts wind project in Inner Mongolia's Gobi Desert revealed that the lowest bid came in at just 2.15 yuan, that is around $0.28 per watt of installed capacity. This marks a 45% drop from last year. Well, in 2021, the average installed cost of wind projects in the United States was $1.5 per watt. That is over 5 times higher than the rock-bottom Chinese prices. Despite recent decline, the 2022 US average of $1.37 per watt is still multiples above China's. The price reduction is largely due to technological breakthroughs and significant economic of scale, particularly in projects span across the Gobi Desert. This extreme cost competitiveness solidifies China's position as the undisputed global leader in green energy. According to analysts, if it is possible to ensure safety operations at these extremely low prices, wind power projects in China's 3 northern regions, which contains more than 90% of the country's wind resources, could double soon. The lower costs are transforming China's energy landscape and its economic model for renewable energy. These developments are pivotal not only for meeting domestic energy demands, but also for exportation. How about giving Confucius a psychological test? What is MBTI? Researchers at Peking University and Xiaoying AI Lab have made a breakthrough in historical psychology. By combining psychologists' expertise with AI's computational power, they have developed an artificial intelligence that can extract psychological insights from classical Chinese texts dating back thousands of years. It is called Contextualized Construct Representation, CCR. By leveraging transformer-based language models similar to GPT-4, CCR analyzes classical Chinese corpora and decodes the psychological constructs embedded within them. Imagine reading an old diary. It contains the writer's thoughts and experiences from many years ago. From what they wrote, you can get a gist of their personalities, beliefs, and emotions. Well, in the same fashion, researchers analyze historical texts to get a deeper understanding of people's psychology in the past. By studying classical Chinese texts, which were instrumental in shaping Chinese thoughts, ethics, and governance, researchers can explore the origin of contemporary psychological processes. To analyze the text more efficiently, the scientists used CCR and surveys to measure psychological traits, which includes traditionalism, norm strengths that measures the extent to which one adheres to societal rules and expectations, and collectivism in classical Chinese texts. Here, the researchers face challenges because most psychological questionnaires are in English, while the historical texts they analyze are in classical Chinese. So they developed a method to convert the English questionnaires into meaningful classical Chinese sentences using a multilingual model. They also created a Chinese historical psychology corpus, which is a collection of historical texts specifically for studying psychology. This corpus helps to train and fine-tune language models to better understand and present classical Chinese texts related to psychology.
So, how accurate is CCR? They also verified the reliability of the CCR method on real historical texts annotated by humans. For example, by measuring the traditionalism psychological index scores in the articles written by different officials during the Northern Song dynasty, they could effectively infer whether the officials supported or opposed the reforms of Wang Anshi's new policies.
There's no doubt that this technology will open new avenues for hypothesis testing and theory development in the field of social science. And that is all for today's Threshold. We hope you like this news section on science and technology in China. As usual, we welcome your feedback and thoughts.
Next on the show is Speak Softly with Charles, and he'll be talking about the US Secretary Yellen's visit to China and then the withdrawal of Israeli troops from southern Gaza.
Big news the last couple of days. Apparently the Israelis have pulled all their troops out of southern Gaza. Supposedly, it's to prepare for other operations elsewhere. Now, this is really an interesting situation because Israel, at least Netanyahu, had talked about going all the way and taking total control over the area. And now they pull out. Why? I think there are several factors here. Number one, militarily, they have not found Hamas to be as easy to deal with as they had themselves anticipated. They thought they could deal with this very quickly, but not at all. Secondly, global condemnation is reaching incredible proportions. And what they have done is genocide, and tens of thousands of women and children have been killed. This is out there for all to see. Even aid workers who notified the Israelis of their location were bombed to death. Now, of course, this is serious because this is Americans, Canadians, British, Anglo-Saxons who've been killed. Live to the Americans who are behind the Israelis on this seem to be more important if they're American and British lives, not Palestinian lives. The third thing that happened is now demonstrations every day in the streets of Israel condemning Netanyahu. And the argument is very simple. Netanyahu doesn't care about the hostages, does not want to settle the dispute through exchange of hostages and the ceasefire. And this is causing a lot of Israeli anger. So internally, he's having problems as well. Now, probably not the least, but the last point that I can think of is Netanyahu and Biden have reached a breaking point in terms of their relationship because U.S. has been under so much pressure and U.S. had to be so totally, completely hypocritical in front of the whole world in order to support the Israelis by providing more bombs, more bullets, more killing machines to the Israelis. And this is for all to see, not only globally, but in the US. This will definitely have some impact on the elections coming later this year. So Biden is really worried about what is happening in Gaza in terms of how it impacts on him in the US. I think whatever the case, what the Israelis have done so far is also indicative of this battle between Israel, well, more like Netanyahu and Biden, because the bombing of the Iranian embassy in Syria by the Israelis is clearly basically an attempt to suck the Iranians into the battle and then forcing, therefore, the US to get involved physically. And that's not good. This is, I think, Netanyahu's last attempt to continue his course. We'll see what happens. I think revenge by the Iranians will come very soon, and it will be quite serious and quite forceful, because you not only have Hamas, you also have the Hezbollah, and you also have the Houthis, who can take action against Israel, and possibly even against the American forces there. We'll see what happens, but this should happen quite soon. Oh, Grandma Yellen is in town, or Auntie Yellen. And that's the image that she has. Soft, gentle, really nice old lady, not flashily dressed, and carries a little backpack, a little bag, or carry it herself, and lands in China and wants to have Sichuan food. Boy, she can take spicy stuff, not bad. Anyway, even over social media in China, there's been quite a bit of talk about how she uses chopsticks so well. So she has a really good image as being a gentle, kind old lady. But also, before she came to China, she talked about, and even after she came, she started talking about U.S. does not seek disengagement with China. U.S. does not seek to break up the relationship economically because it will be disastrous for the rest of the world. Now, all of these sound really nice, but also the big attack, vicious, aggressive attack, even though softly spoken, has been on China's overcapacity in three things: electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries, and the solar. By the way, all of these are related to new and renewable sources of energy, it seems. Now, no question, U.S. is not allowing Chinese vehicles, electric vehicles, to be sold in the U.S. On 100% duty, you really can't sell very much. Also, blockage of solar panels by imposing heavy duties as well. But of course, the complaint was that China subsidizes its solar manufacturers, its solar industry. But just before she came to China, I think Suniva was reopened. It went bankrupt in 2017 because it could not compete with Chinese products. Now, big story was made of how she went and reopened the factory with heavy government subsidies. On the one hand, you complain about Chinese government subsidies. On the other hand, you also provide heavy subsidies to your own companies by the government. And the most absurd one, of course, is this Anti-Inflation Act. Doesn't do anything about anti-inflation. It's basically to block Chinese products from the U.S. market by creating protectionist measures of various types through subsidies to U.S.-produced products. So who is more open? China's more open. Is there overcapacity? No, there isn't an overcapacity because you plan on a global basis. There is very substantial demand that should be met by the better product, by the product that will make consumers happier, spend less, get better product, and so on. So all of this stuff about overcapacity is really an attempt to suppress China's rise in these three sectors in which China has already become dominant force. But don't forget, this is for green. This is for protection against climate change. This is all good for the earth. So you pick the three sectors, actually, which are all good for the earth, and you are retarding the progress of technology development that will allow us to participate, allow consumers to participate in addressing climate change. It's really sad. This is what the U.S. has become: hypocritical, totally against its own principles, against the principles that it vows for decades. So Yellen appears to be a really nice old lady, cannot take a hard line. But she said a whole bunch of nice things about not disengaging with China. We must cooperate, and compete on fair basis, on fair ground, and so on and so forth. But if we look at politically what has been happening in the last couple of weeks and going into the next couple of weeks, the U.S. is making every attempt to stir up things again in South China Sea, in Asia in general, by having these military exercises. AUKUS and also Japan and also now the Philippines are building more bases around China by building new bases in the Philippines. 400 military installations surrounding China. And that's not enough. If you're really serious about cooperating and collaborating, well, maybe you should take some of these military bases away. If you're really worried about continuation of inflation, well, maybe you should reduce your military budget. The US military budget is the equivalent of the next 9 military budgets combined. So maybe you shouldn't just talk the talk. You should also walk the walk.
Well, let's continue the show with the Thinkers Forum, where our thinkers and scholars will share with us their brightest ideas about China and its relations with the rest of the world. Today, it focuses largely on the bilateral relations between India and China. Shyam Saran is the former Foreign Secretary of India, who doubles as the president of the India International Center.
India, of course, views China as a fellow Asian country, a very important neighbor, and also as a kind of a civilizational state, with a very long, continuous and very rich history, which is quite similar to India as well. I mean, we also have a very long civilizational history. And the two countries also had very close cultural links through history, with the spread of Buddhism to not only to China, but to other countries in Asia. There were very long-standing trade links between the two countries, whether it was through the caravan trails across Central Asia or the maritime links through the Indian Ocean. So there has been a long history of quite tense contact between the two countries. But still, I would say that despite this history of exchanges, maybe India does not have much familiarity with China today, and neither does China have much familiarity with India. And this is one of the reasons why I wrote this book, a couple of years ago, how China sees India and the world, and what is the history of China's sort of culture, China's history, which in a sense determines how it looks at the world and how it looks at India as well, precisely in order to try and bridge that gap of understanding between the two countries. Now, it is, of course, a fact that if you take, for example, the Chinese revolutionary period in the 19th century, early 20th century, if you take the history of India's struggle against colonial rule during the same period, it would also be fair to say that the two countries and the peoples of the two countries, more importantly, did have a lot of sympathy and support for each other. And they, in fact, in a sense, our intellectuals, our public-spirited people work together in order to deal with this Western sort of domination. This is why India was perhaps the first country to recognize the People's Republic of China after its establishment in 1949. And since then, during that early period, there was a fairly strong, friendly relationship between India and China. If you recall, India and China worked together, for example, during the Afro-Asian Conference in Bandung in 1955. The two countries also were the founders of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, the Panchsheel, which in a sense tried to put forward a new code for relations among states, based on mutual respect, mutual understanding, that irrespective of different social systems, countries of the world should coexist together peacefully and should cooperate with each other. In a sense, those principles are still very relevant in our today's world. So there was a initial period of very positive relationship between the two countries, a lot of cooperation between the two countries. But as you know, as a result of the unfortunate conflict which broke out in 1967 over differences over the India-China border, the relations in a sense went into a kind of a deep freeze. Two countries, once again, in a sense, diverged from one another. But again, in the 1980s, both countries tried to make an effort to try and bring their relationship back on a more normal and on a more even keel. In this respect, the role played by Deng Xiaoping was very important, because he put forward the idea that even though India and China must continue to try and resolve the issue relating to the border, they should try and develop their relations in other fields, whether it is trade and economic relations, whether it is cultural relations, to see whether there are opportunities for the two countries to cooperate together on the international scale, in international organizations. So this particular idea, which was in a sense formalized when our then Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited China in 1988, this was in a sense became the template for the relationship to be taken forward in the subsequent years. And it was at that time that Deng Xiaoping also put forward the view that there could not be an Asian century without the simultaneous rise of both India and China. That the emergence of both the countries was very important in order to bring about the resurgence of Asia. So since then, the relationship developed on the principle which, in China you call Ta Thong Xiao Yi. That is, try to work together on important issues and reserve differences on small issues. So that is the spirit in which the relationship was taken forward. With regard to the border issue, we came to conclude a few very important agreements like the Peace and Tranquility Agreement of 1993. Then we had another one in 1996. And when I myself was the Foreign Secretary of India, in 2005, when Premier Wan Jiabao visited India, then we also had another border peace and tranquility agreement in 2005. So this ensured that while we work together on issues which are of convergent interest, we do not allow the border issue to try and overshadow the relationship. That was the spirit in which we were doing it. And very importantly, during Premier Wan Jiabao's visit, we reached a very important consensus. And this consensus was, one, that China does not pose a threat to India, and that India does not pose a threat to China. Secondly, that in Asia and the world, there is enough space both for a strong and developed India as well as a strong and developed China. That there was no contradiction in the simultaneous emergence of those two countries. Thirdly, very important, that a developing India was an economic opportunity for China. And similarly, a expanding Chinese economy was a very important economic and commercial opportunity for India. So this was also part of the consensus. And finally, they came to the conclusion that today, India-China relations have gone beyond the bilateral relationship, and they have now acquired a global dimension. Because of the fact that these are two of the largest emerging economies, if they work together, they can make a difference in terms of the shaping of the emerging world order. So this was a very important consensus which was arrived at. And it was based on the understanding that India and China have a certain kind of identity as the two largest, most populous, emerging economies. Now, I think it is important to also understand that that earlier consensus had enabled us to deal with whatever issues once in a while arose on the border. We had mechanisms in place. I mentioned to you the peace and tranquility agreements, which provided a framework for us to deal with whatever incidents or some contradiction arose at the border. This particular kind of a context or a framework did not actually work in 2022 when we had the latest, rather serious incident at the border in the eastern part of Ladakh. And although it is encouraging that we have managed to continue our bilateral consultations, our bilateral negotiations, several rounds have been held to try and resolve this issue. Some of the issues have been resolved, but there are other issues which still remain to be resolved. So this is where we are at the moment. And while China believes that we should return to the principle that we should set aside the border issue and deal with other aspects of India-China relations as before, India believes that because of the seriousness of this issue, we need to resolve this before actually we can once again resume normal, full relations between India and China. So this is where we are at the moment. We have not yet been able to achieve some kind of a common understanding as to how we take India-China relations forward in what is today a very new and difficult kind of international arena.
And that's how we wrap up on today's edition of the show. Thank you for watching, and don't hesitate to send in your comments, thoughts, feedback and suggestions through the email provided below. My name is Makiza Latifa. Join us same time next week. See you.